So Phil, I want to shout out to the intestinal fortitude of both Premodern's player base and the creator of Premodern, Martin Berlin, because a year ago ish, or maybe at the beginning of the year, we were talking to Phil Wynn, and we were pretty sure that like some kind of a ban was going to happen to shake the format up. Something was going to come along to make Black playable again. People were worried about Dreadnought. People were worried about Tide. A lot was being talked about, but looking back now and looking how the meta has evolved and the decks that are popular and how healthy the format is and how diverse the format is, I think you got to give props to Martin Berlin for having the intestinal fortitude to hold on, wait and see if the players and not the game's like impending power creep, because it doesn't exist in Premodern, were able to solve for X in this format. Not solve the format, but be like, hey, like if the problem right now is this blue enchantment or this artifact that needs 2 cards to whatever, people figured out ways around those decks and were able to. If you look at the top 8 for LobsterCon specifically, I think those decks are represented, but they're not dominating. I think a lot can be said for a format that has this kind of closed loop where you're not seeing any of the modern design happen, where a card gets printed that is just unsolvable by the format. Like, I think everything that is in Premodern right now at this point in time, and I could be wrong in this, is a solvable card.
Yeah, presumably, right? Like it seems like the flux has changed. I mean, there was a point where last year's LobsterCon, Mono Burn was one of the most played decks, and now the position is just that like Burn is unplayable against like the stuff that is otherwise the top of the metagame. So it is demonstrative that what you are saying is correct, and now we'll see with the Boogeyman. I mean, being Tied, Dreadnought, and then now what, Enchantress?
Yeah, Enchantress and Dreadnought. I mean, let's look at
Replenish,
TC decks. This episode of Eternal Durdles is sponsored by Cardmill, the first automated scanner and sorter built specifically for trading card game players. With its intentionally compact design, Cardmill uses AI-powered recognition to identify each card and sync inventory with real-time pricing, batching up to 300 cards at a time by name, set, color, or type. Collection data is securely stored in the Cardmill network, giving players full access to their cards through an easy-to-use web portal. Cardmill supports Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Flesh and Blood, Disney Lorcana, Star Wars Unlimited, and many more to come. Created by software engineer and longtime Magic the Gathering player Jonathan Dumanis, Cardmill launches on July 22nd on Kickstarter with early bird pricing starting at $350. Backers receive lifetime access to all software updates and new features. Go to cardmill.com to learn more and reserve your path to the future of card sorting.
There's this sort of like loose big enchantment style stuff like Parallax Tide and Opalescence. Opalescence is the back of both the Replenish deck and the win condition of choice for the Enchantress deck. So maybe there's something to be said about Opalescence. Like you have Parallax Tide, and Parallax Tide is connected to both the Tide deck and the Replenish deck. And then you have Dreadnought, which also touches into Tide, and that's why Tide was getting so much heat on it before. So like they're like, I think that most often we've been looking at things like, oh yeah, Oath of Druids and Survival of the Fittest and what are the other like significant power outliers like Gush, like the things that are just like obviously broken because they were broken in other formats. And then of course they're like the power outliers in Premodern, but like not necessarily to the extent that any of them are oppressive, even though like you could argue that Oath of Druids sort of crushes creature decks, but not necessarily. Like there are ways to beat it.
Yeah,
I think it's like also looking at like I haven't heard anybody talk about like Opalescence in that realm, but like the results would suggest it.
Yeah, it's funny to look. I'm kind of trying to figure out a way that I can search this because unfortunately there's not a lot of online data for Premodern, but I'm doing a quick search here just to look and see the what the decks look like for the top 100 decks kind of situation for Premodern, just to get an idea of what the format looks like. And I can only really do that at a snapshot right now, and I don't have the data. I could like create the data myself, but here we are talking about it right now. But the format from the last 90 days or so is let's see, from the past 30 days, tier decks in the last 30 days. Burn is still up there at 1374.
People just love casting a ball lightning.
There's that, and the deck is accessible. You know, we got to hand that to the format. The format makes one of the better decks in the format accessible. Stifle Knot, 1200, right? After that, we've got
Zach.
his 800.
Zach, let's go off the rails here and talk about Madness. Every time I've ever seen anybody play Madness, it seems like nobody's ever updated the deck in the last 2 decades because nobody has actually endeavored to do so.
I gotta say, I've played Madness a few times in leagues on Magic Online, and there are some innovations. One of them being like throwing in Winter Orb is pretty good. A lot of the decks are just mono green, doing like the stompy thing, and then also throwing Madness creatures in, and then playing like Goose, which is a fine Madness card, in War of the Worm.
I think Goose is one of the better innovations for the deck, just because a 1-mana 3/3 in this format that can't be touched is actually really powerful.
The can't be touched is huge, and I think it might even be a sideboard card in some decks, because like a deck like the Counter Phoenix deck I was playing has a little bit of trouble with a 3/3 that I can't bolt, right?
Yeah, and like Waterfront Bouncer plus Winter Orb is also pretty powerful, right? Like, I think Waterfront Bouncer, just as a card in general, is probably underplayed for the most part, and it is a merfolk. I think like I've been thinking about how to put together. Let me tell you about my journey in Premodern, Zach. As Sacred Torch approaches, I've been trying to figure out Parfait ever since Land Tax got banned, and the more and more experiments that I've seen, and you saw it when we were at LobsterCon. Like, I mean, I put you guys through the ringer on like trying to find me some cards. I was like, find me Oath of Lieges. I need some Barb Sextants. I need to find Mana Silex. Like all these different things that are all bad, unplayable cards. And I was like, guys, we got to do this. My life depends on it. And ultimately, what I came down to deciphering was the thing that I'm actually trying to solve, beyond like figuring out how to offset the raw cards that are lost from not having land tax, is I got to figure out how do I make a 4 to 5 color deck that uses nothing but islands. I want to be a 5 color mono blue deck, right? The challenge is, how do I be a 5 color mono blue deck
in a format with only 5 fetch lands?
In a format with only 5 fetch lands, in which that you only want one of them, because if they don't fetch island, then every time, essentially the reason that you want that is because ever since land tax got banned, I found that the most powerful thing you can do is gush, and every land that you put into play that is not island is time walking when you can use gush, and every time walk of gush is just like, I think that like if you were to catalog like every time you time walk yourself off gush to your win percentage, it would just be a direct correlation to every time you do it, your win percentage goes down. So the what are the solves for that? And the last, I don't know, 2.5, 3 weeks of thinking about Premodern, I have just been bouncing my mind around Riftstone Portal. And I'm just like, okay, if you can put Riftstone Portal reliably into the graveyard, then all of your islands tap for all the colors that you would want in the Parfait deck, your primary colors, right? Like maybe you're splashing red for Power Blast, or maybe you're splashing black for Engineered Plague because you have Mox Diamonds, and so at the time you have Undiscovered Paradise, so like you have enough little splash that like maybe it's fine, but your base main colors are obviously blue, white for Swords to Plowshares and Wrath of God, and then green for Gaia's Blessing and like maybe some sideboard cards.
Or maybe
but that's it. Or maybe an Oath. Yeah, of course, maybe Oath. But like you're essentially your base Bant, right? And so I've been like looking at how do I make Riftstone Portal part of the deck, because you're a Gaia's Blessing deck, but you want Riftstone Portal in the yard. So it's not like you necessarily want to mill your Gaia's Blessing and then turn off your Riftstone Portals unless you really have good, reliable ways to get your Riftstone Portal back into your yard. But as I started thinking more and more about Riftstone Portal, I've talked to Madness players in the past where I remember, and I think they were talking about how like the mana in their deck is so bad because they don't have the Misty Rainforest as a fetch land to like, make the colors better. And so like the mana sequencing in terms of color that they actually want is they want like forest and then nothing but islands for the rest of the game. It's like if they know that they could always just draw exactly green source and then nothing but blue, like island sources for the rest of the game, like that's how it would be drawn up. And it then got me to thinking, I'm like, man, the deck that would have the easiest time putting Riftstone Portal into the graveyard is Madness.
Yeah. And it would work with the deck. How are you going to put Riftstone Portal, or do you not want to share that since it's another week
we can
away?
share that in a second. But first, I want to talk about the line that like made me go, oh man, maybe Madness is where to go. Imagine you have 3 islands in play, Zach. You an island, and you go, okay, Frantic Search, draw 2, discard 2, one of which is the Riftstone Portal, untap, and now you can just cast the Madness, Roar of the Worm or whatever that you just put in the off the Frantic Search, right? Discard Roar and Riftstone Portal, untap the 3 lands, now all can tap for green, so you can cast that. Like, that is hot as shit.
Okay.
That is so hot. Who's playing around that, Zach? Who's not? Who's gonna assume that a 4/4 is about to hit the table on 3 islands, Zach? Who's doing it? Nobody's playing around that.
Finding the right high-end cards for legacy, vintage, pre-modern, or old-school Magic can be challenging. That's where a friend's 3-for-1 trading come in.
3-for-1 Trading is one of Europe's top Magic the Gathering retailers with an incredible selection of premium singles, sealed product, and even full sets, all available with free, fast, and secure worldwide shipping.
They add fresh inventory every Wednesday with weekly deals and discounts. So whether you're hunting for that elusive piece of power, a legacy staple, or something spicy for your collection, they've got you covered.
First high-end orders over $500 or €500, use the code EDFREE to get free worldwide shipping.
Check them out now at the number 3, the number 4, the number 1.gg/ED. That link takes you right to the shop and helps support the channel.
Huge thanks to 3-for-1 Trading for supporting the Legacy community. Now back to the show.
I have to say, Phil, I've played against some weird decks. I'm interested to see what you're up to. One of the weirder decks I played this week was, have you ever seen Balancing Act?
Yes, balancing things is that's a known quantity. Come on now.
Okay.
Zach,
you know what happens, Phil? Generally, I'm playing decks that counter like mono blue, Tide, and Stasis. Those decks don't work against those decks because I'm just like, no.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know what you're doing. I don't need to find out. No.
Always counter the namesake of the deck for sure. But yeah, this is apparently Balancing Things is your broccoli soup.
Yeah. I mean, I Balancing Things. I know the name of the deck, but I have not played against it ever. So yeah, I guess that's what it is.
Yeah, there is a essentially like I'm curious to continue looking at how Riftstone Portal is underplayed in the format, just because the mana in the format is so bad. But like, if you were able to like solve for mana in some reliable ways that aren't like, totally off, then I also wonder what that would, how would that actually look in terms of like what sort of avenues of deck building could open up. And when I thought about the Frantic Search, War of the Worm, Riftstone Portal line, I was just like, man, it's just like got to be so hot to be like, discard any of that and then turn on your mana base at instant speed, essentially, to then do all this other stuff at instant speed. So your opponent just has to be like, well, if they have this thing, then I can't take this action. But if they don't have this thing, then it is only beneficial for me to take this action. But now how do I call? Like, the only thing they have is a discard outlet, but they also could just not have a discard outlet and discard outlet at instant speed because of like Frantic Search and the like. So it's like, what do I do? What do I do? It's like suddenly now you have to like play around circular logic at instant speed, but then also you have to play around War of the Worm at instant speed, and like the mana sucks. And typically, if like the mana is tight, it's like, yep, I had to play my green source because I wanted to play this Nimamon Goose or whatever, and now I'm tapped off green, so I can't. They know that madness isn't incoming, but it's like it is if they go Riftstone Portal. Get wrecked.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought about. This is the problem with playing like one specific deck. Like, I always said this about Stasis. Stasis solves for like every real problem in the format. What? Lightning Angel is the only thing I really have to worry about. The occasional Yoshin soldier.
We have learned about the cute bottleneck of any of the madness creatures being able to get underneath the Black Vice.
Yeah. You can. So that was
it.
actually a thing. Is like you'd have to counter. But the thing, the beauty of that was that you didn't really have to worry about that too much, because you could just bounce it eventually and then counter it, right? Like, as long as it wasn't attacking you and you had a stasis out, you're like, yeah, I'm not winning yet, but I'm certainly not losing. And them having to do stuff basically put them in a situation where like anytime they attack, they'd have to discard their whole hand and do like 7 to you, right? Off of a mongrel.
A good notion for when you're playing stasis, if you're not dead, you're probably winning.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, that's the thing.
Like,
but
that's how
now, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to, like, I'm not saying I'm no longer a stasis truther, but for these bigger tournaments like LobsterCon, where I switched to a different deck, the main event, or for the Sacred Torch that's coming up, I wanted to experiment. I wanted to brew a little bit. I'm playing a brew for LobsterCon. I'm not going to talk about what the brew is just yet, but I'm playing a brew for LobsterCon, and I'm pretty excited about like identifying new play patterns, possibly unlocking a new deck archetype, which is super fun for anybody playing the format, right? If you see something that, like, let's say I win Sacred Torch, right? People are going to be like, oh crap, that is a new thing you can do, and they're going to be looking to to duplicate that, right? So that's the dream as a Magic player for me. Is like I affect the format in some way. I become the guy who made the deck, right? Like that's so much of our Magic. So what I'm looking for, so much of our Magic journey as competitive players is that like one granule of clout you can claim. Winning a big tournament, great. I mean that's as good as it gets, right? Pro Tour, amazing, right? But I think for people that are on our level that are not, pro tour grinders and whatnot, is being able to be like, hey, I invented this deck archetype and it's being played now, right? Like we don't know the guy who invented Oops All Spells, but I'm sure that community is very proud of the ideas that like got the deck to be to the point where it is, as much as it's a blight on the format now. It took a lot of doing and innovation to get the deck to be where it is now, because it was a meme deck for the longest time.
Well, it's certainly and the innovation was WotC just printing more MDFCs.
It turns out, yeah.
It turns out that was the innovation was how do we solve this problem? Oh, WotC will just give us more lands we can play.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, so to me, like going back to the how the format has kind of solved for itself. You look at what Martin Berlin said earlier in the year about like trying to unlock black as a color, and broccoli soup exists now. Like black is not an overplayed color, but I think it's back in there. Like people are playing black decks again, being able to like play that as even a secondary color to be like, okay, I need duresses or something like that for my deck. I think that it proves that modern design, some of that is like late stage capitalism working at like the highest speed possible. It's kind of like it's its own like economics degree just like crashing into itself. You have to buy cards when they put something like Nadu out in Modern Horizons, or when they put out Tamio in Modern Horizons or whatnot. And those cards are just built to go right into Legacy. And we talked about this in a previous episode about Premier, and the idea with Premier is that wouldn't be a thing. Eternal Dirtles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy, and even fan-supported formats like Premodern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned. Very similarly to how it is in Premodern, where like now cards would come into Premier, but in Premodern the format's locked, right? So you really have to one, hope that all the tools exist within the format to solve these problems, right? Like, okay, I'll start main decking overloads instead of lava darts, right? Like for Phyrexian dreadnoughts instead of goblin lackeys or jackal pups or whatever. Like there are things you can do as the format sort of says, like, this is what we're all going to do to brick those decks, right?
I think that's also like the difference of why it feels like it's different in Premodern, because the card pool available in Premodern, like if you're like, okay, yeah, I'll play overloads instead of lava darts, that choice has a target in mind, right? Like that is like, I am assuming that these overloads are going to have text against the majority of the matchups that I'm going to play against to make this choice worth it, or I'm going to run into enough decks where the downside of drawing this blank and otherwise that has no targets will not set me back far enough that it's still not worth to make the choice in the first place.
Or you just play Forbidden, pitch it.
Right, or you play essentially like the looting type stuff, which is your way of like the pseudo brainstorms in the format, right? It's like, oh yeah, if you have foil in your deck, then you can sort of like leverage the fact that if you have a dead card, you can always just pitch it, right? It's similar space, but the difference between that and like modern day Legacy is, if you're thinking like, oh, let me put this other tool into my deck to like solve a problem, most of the stuff that like is a solve problem type thing is just like the universal answer for stuff. So you're like, okay, the downside of this is it will catch whatever it is, right? Like if I put a leyline binding in my deck, it's like, yeah, that's going to be like, okay, well, Sword Splashers can hit creatures, and then leyline binding can catch literally everything else. The downside of me putting this in is if they have literally anything, then this will work on it. Whereas like if you're putting in the overload, because that's the card pool that you have available to you, you have to both like know what you're doing and make that choice and believe in that choice to then pull the trigger on it. You know what I mean? And so like, I think the reason that sort of thing feels different in Premodern is because of that agency. Like you have to, like if somebody plays an overload against you main board game one, you're like, respect, dude. You chose to do that.
Yeah.
Like, that is an opportunity cost that you took the gamble on, believing in whatever it is that you believe in to make that choice. Where it's like, if you put in the Witherbloom command, it's like, do players play 2 CMC permanents in their decks?
Yeah.
Like, it's like,
And the
it's just not the
occasional
same.
X1, like
It's just not the same calculus to try and figure it out, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, so this will just work because of course.
It's funny you mentioned that, because like the concept of like modal cards initially was like great game design. Oh, like my, what was like the first modal card, like probably the dual cards, right? Like Fire Ice, right? Technically one of the first modal cards where you could pick more than one thing, right? Great game design initially. But if you lean too heavily on it, they just become catch-alls, and that means that you have to. So if follow me here, if you start printing all these catch-alls, then you get to a point where all the threats have to be able to beat the catch-alls. Then you have to print threats that are even better, and this starts to truncate the way the game is played and closes the window for reactions, right? So I think actually what we've just stumbled upon here is that when you create these catch-all cards, right, you're putting pressure on design to be like, okay, but like we need something that players will want to buy. Late stage capitalism, right? We want something that players will want to buy that will circumvent these answers that we've printed that were better than the previous answers to kill those threats. And it keeps being, it's a nuclear race that puts you in a position where you have to keep buying, the next set, because the next card is, okay, then we put out Leyline Binding. Okay, cool. Then if Leyline Binding's a thing, here's a land that's a creature that can't be hit by Leyline Binding. Okay, well then if that's the case, we're also going to put a Leyline Binding that you can cycle it to look through your deck and find a wasteland. This just keeps piling on and piling on. Oh, now we've put the hexproof on that on the same creature that we've designed. The design just becomes so innocuously parasitic that you eventually get to the point where you can only play one threat, and it's the best threat in the game, and you can only play one piece of removal, and it's the most like specific removal for that one thing. And then the next set, all that changes. This is where we are in Legacy right now, is that every time a Modern Horizons set comes out, the threat base changes and the game truncates, right?
Yeah, there was I forget which podcast I was listening to, but they were like, yeah, Ragavan was a real shit design, but everybody really, like, they clearly saw that people wanted Ragavans and bought Ragavans because it was just so linearly powerful, because it's like a card that just makes mana and draws cards. And so it was like this like obscenely powerful thing for the cost of red. And so instead of WotC recognizing like power creep, bad, don't do it like that, not good, and then we have to ban it.
They were like, these idiots will buy anything that we do like that.
Oh, as long as we print a Ragavan, they will buy it endlessly. And so they were like, every color gets a Ragavan. You get Nethergoyf, and you get Tameo, and you get whatever it's like. Then DRC comes in. It's like, it's like everybody gets a Ragavan. Ragavan's for everybody. Everything draws cards and replaces itself and is free.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Is like, these are moves made specifically. Not to get too deep and put the tinfoil hat on, but they're made specifically for the shareholders.
When are we going to get a shareholders card?
Shareholders. It's just, the game is over. You've won the game, but you don't have to. You can never play Magic again. You don't have to.
Yeah.
You've arrived at the Pro Tour and you don't have to play Magic.
I cast shareholders, which lets me decide what cards are in your deck.
Yeah, pretty much, right? Look at me, I'm the DCI. But yeah, I don't know. It's funny, we in this pre-modern episode we kind of came to the conclusion that that's how design works, and it is refreshing that in pre-modern the tools are there. The game there's enough time in the format. The average turn in the format is late enough that you can pivot around and make these decisions, and you're given a point where, like, Phil, let's say I don't go up against a whole bunch of Phyrexian Dreadnought decks, right? I'm not completely punished out of the game for making the mistake of playing an Overload in my deck and drawing it, right? Whereas you kind of are. in Legacy. If you're like, I gotta stop all these artifact decks, and then you just like don't get paired up against any artifact decks ever, you just like you've thrown the tournament out the window.
The difference there is also because like
Brainstorm.
you can't afford to have a dead card in Legacy. You can afford to have a dead card in Premodern sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, like the games just go a little bit longer. What was the card the other day? We were talking to Higby, who is one of our prominent deck donation people so far. If
we're looking forward to the next one. Yeah,
if you want to submit a donation deck list, hop into our Patreon tier. But he said to us, what was the thing that he said the other day where we were like trying to solve a problem, and then he brought up a card, and I was like, oh, that is really clever, but also like nobody's ever heard of that card. Like, what did he do? You know what I'm talking about? It was in that chat.
I don't know the card. Yeah.
I gotta find this thing. It was just like one of those things where I was like, oh, that is why this format is so forking cool, because something was brought up and he was like, yeah, what about this for that? And it's just like, oh my God, it was just like, it was genius. And I'm trying to remember what it was. No, it wasn't Squeeze. I'm looking. I'll try and find it. If I find it before this episode is done, then that'll be great. But you know, I also was like 300 messages behind in that chat, so
there was a lot going on in that chat.
Yeah.
We'll link the card below
if I can find it. I just remember it was really clever. But that comes up a lot. Like, hey, here's a problem, and then it's like, oh, it was Lodestone Bauble.
Lodestone Bauble. Okay, yeah, Lodestone Bauble.
It was Lodestone Bauble, but like it was Lodestone. Like he was playing Rayglay. He was playing Thawing Glaciers in his mono red deck or something, and then he was like, well, if I'm playing Thawing Glaciers, I just got to figure out how to like not lose to Armageddon. And he was like, what if I just put Bauble, Lodestone Bauble, so if they Armageddon, I just Lodestone Bauble and just continue to Thawing Glaciers or something like that. It was like Lodestone Bauble. Zach.
Lodestone Bauble is a card you can play to get your lands back.
Like, who was like, you know what? I'm gonna put Lodestone Bauble as a counter because I'm a Thawing Glacier. That's genius.
This was the discussion I had with Higby about that. Is it was Lodestone Bauble versus.
I think we're back.
There we go. So the discussion I was having with Higby was how like these Thawing Glaciers decks that he's been having me run can beat a deck that wants to play Armageddon or Parallax Tide or whatever. And Lodestone Bauble solves for Armageddon. Does not solve for Parallax Tide. So ultimately I was like, why are we not playing counter spells? Like,
dude, but like if you're playing mono red Thawing Glaciers, you're playing Pyroblast.
Yeah,
to stop.
You have to. Yeah,
of course. But you just play all the blasts to stop the Parallax Tide, and then you play forking Lodestone Bauble to counter the army. It's so good. That's good.
That's what I love about this format is that you can do you have the brewer's chance in this format. As I think what I would call it.
You have legitimate problem solving potential.
Yeah, it's a breath of fresh air is what I'm getting at. So to close this episode, what do you guys think? Do you have any experience like kind of figuring out like a problem in the format to solve, or do you think I'm completely off base and it's just time to ban Parallax Tide and Dreadnought?
Maybe
right in the comments.
Maybe it's time, if we need to deal with Parallax Tide, maybe it's time to unban land tax, you cowards.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. Hey, if you want to do a deck donation, you know where to find us. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button.
You can also support us on patreon.com/eternaldurdles, which now offers the new deck donation tier.
During July, the deck donation patrons will get a 2-for-1 special where both Phil and I will run your deck through a league.
I'll play literally whatever you want.
So brew your spiciest or stock us up with a stock list.
I'll literally play whatever you want.
Thanks for watching.